Hello everybody and welcome back to American Textbook Reading. My name is Brian Stuart and today we're going over Social Studies Book 4, Lesson 3. And Lesson 3 is about we are part of the world. So if you think about it, we are all one big community in the world. So in this unit we will discover different types of communities and types of aid communities can give to each other. So let's begin as usual with the vocabulary. The first word is nation. Nation simply means a country, right? So what country are you in right now? What country are you from? Are you watching this from Korea, which is a country? Are you watching this from Turkey? That's a country as well. Are you watching this from the United States? Also another country. So of course the world is divided into many countries, and we call these countries, or we can also say nations. Disaster. A disaster, oh, it's terrible. A disaster is something really bad. It's a very bad event. What are types of disasters? Well, fires, like a big fire, a flood. We see sometimes in the news, certain parts of the world have terrible floods when it rains too much. Or earthquakes, very terrible events that happen, and usually many people lose their lives and many other people are injured or lose their homes or in danger because they have no food to eat after some type of disaster. So disasters are really bad events. Aid. Aid simply means help. It's a more formal word. It's a fancier word than help. Help is a very common word, but aid is a little bit more of a formal word. Aid just means help or support. So aid can be a noun. It can also be a verb. Aid as a noun is the things that you give to somebody to help them, especially in a disaster. But you can also aid somebody. That's a verb. That means to help them. So of course help can be a noun or a verb as well. But aid is just more formal than help. Supply. Supply can also be a noun or a verb. In this case, it's a noun because it means things that are needed, such as food, medicines, or clothes. And usually when we talk about, if we say supply is things, we usually say supplies, right? So supplies, when you're talking about a noun, and let's say you want to give some things that are needed to another person. They had a fire in their house, right? The family, they had a fire, they lost their home. So you say, well, gee, I want to help them out. So let's give them water, let's give them food, let's give them blankets, clothing. Those are supplies. Okay, so supply is a count noun, and we usually use it in the plural because you don't just give one supply, you give supplies to people, and it's various things, food, medicine, clothes, those are supplies. Okay. Next we have discuss. Discuss means to talk about something, to make a decision. And be careful because many of my Korean students will use the preposition about after discuss, but do not do that. That's wrong because discuss means to talk about. So when you say, let's discuss about the problem, you're saying, let's talk about the problem. Why would you say about twice? You don't need to. Discuss already means talk about. So just say, we should discuss the problem. We should discuss our plans, but do not use the preposition about after discuss. It sounds very strange, and native speakers do not do that. So please, if you don't get into that habit, okay? Don't use about after discuss. It's just discuss. Discuss the problem, discuss the plans, discuss the meeting, discuss something. Okay, good. Next we have meeting. Meeting, of course, is when many people get together and they talk about something, they discuss something. An occasion is like an event or a time when people, and you can see many people, a meeting could just be two people, of course. You could have a two-person meeting. This is more typical, though, of a business meeting. Many people get together. And why do they get together? Because they want to discuss an issue. They want to discuss something. And usually they come to a decision. Not always, but usually they try to come to a decision. They try to decide something. So decide is a verb, decision is a noun. So we want to discuss something in order to make a decision or in order to decide something, a course of action. Next we have be made up of. Whew, it's 4 words, right? But this is a phrasal verb that means that various parts combine to make a whole. Be made up of, it says be composed of, but what does composed of mean? Composed of means that you have many different parts and you put them all together and that makes a whole thing. And you can say it's made up of. This is a good example because if you think of a hamburger, right, what is a hamburger made up of? A hamburger has many different parts. It has bread, it has vegetables, tomato, it has meat, it has more vegetables, pickles and lettuce, and it has bread on the top. So it is made up of all these things. It's missing something. What is it missing? Ketchup. There's no ketchup. Okay, but many people put ketchup on their hamburgers, so a hamburger is made up of many different things. And of course you could put different things on your hamburgers. Some people get very creative with what they make their hamburgers up with. Okay, so to be made up of is to be composed of or to contain many different parts to make a whole thing. Okay. Finally, we have keep in touch. This is very important. Also a phrase. It's kind of an idiomatic expression. Keep in touch means to keep communicating. Ooh, that's a big word. Communicating, talking with somebody. So, if you have a friend and your friend moves away to a different town or a different nation, you don't want to lose that friend, so you want to keep in touch with that person. So maybe sometimes you send them email. Maybe you call them on the phone. Well, that's a very old phone, on your cell phone. Or you text them. You can text internationally these days as well. But you want to stay in touch. Stay in touch, keep in touch means the same thing. So stay in touch, keep in touch, it doesn't matter. They both mean the same thing. It means you don't lose touch with a friend who has moved away, friend or relative who has moved away. Okay, so that is our vocabulary for this lesson. Let's talk about the 2 main ideas in this lesson. The first idea is the idea of our world. Remember at the beginning of this lesson I said we all live in the same community, the same global community. But when you think about it, you can break that community down into different parts or different groups. And from the smallest to the largest. So the smallest community or part of your world is your home. It includes your parents, your brothers and your sisters, maybe some extended family members, aunts, uncles, right? Maybe your grandma lives with you. That is your home. That's your very small community. Then if we get bigger from that, think about your neighborhood. Think about the families who live next to you, your neighbors. Your neighbors live in your neighborhood. A neighborhood, of course, is the area around your house or apartment or wherever you're living in, right? And that is your neighborhood. It's a small community of many families living next to each other. Then we have community. So a community is made up of many different neighborhoods, and a community might be a village, a town, or a city, right? Those are different types of communities. But even in a city, you might have smaller districts in the city. Those are separate communities. So community is larger than a neighborhood, but maybe smaller than a city. Could be inside a city or it could be the whole city. But it's just, a group of people living in the same area, a larger area than just a neighborhood. An estate. Now, different countries will divide the area inside their country using different names. Some countries use the word province, for example, to divide their nation into different areas. In America, they use the word state, of course, United States. of America. It's many different states that are united and form the nation of America. So a state is a subdivision or a division of a large country. And of course, in many other countries, they don't use state, they use province, or they might use even another word than that to describe the smaller regions within a nation. And of course, the last one, nation. Nation, of course, is a country, and nations can be small or they can be very large, right? Nations can be small like, Luxembourg I'm thinking of, or, very small, some very small European countries or nations, or they could be very large like India, huge nation, or Russia, very big landmass. Okay. Now, that's not the final part though. We also have other nations, and you see a bunch of flags there. Looks like that might be in front of the United Nations, which is a group of, it's a political organization where many nations get together and they work because they're part of the world or global community. So nations, all the nations of the world also form another type of community, and that is of course the world. Okay, so nations work together to help each other. And that is the whole point of the United Nations, which is an important organization. United Nations. So basically this organization, United Nations, headquartered in New York City, they are many member states, they call them member states, but it's actually member nations, get together and discuss how to help each other and how to solve problems that everybody has in the world. Okay. Next, we have types of aid. Now, of course, if we all live in the same community, it's important to help each other, whether our community is small or whether our community is larger or our community is global, right? So what are different types of aid? And remember, aid means help. Well, if you want to help somebody, you can send them you can help them in different ways. One way, you could send them money. Money, of course, is very useful because it doesn't take, you don't need to transport it. You can send it electronically, and it can be used in every part of the world to purchase things that are needed, like food, medicine, shelter, things like that. You can also send services, and in fact, many countries do send services. Let's say there's an earthquake in a nation. Many countries will send like medical services, emergency medical people, doctors, EMTs, things like that, and ambulances, equipment. So they'll send medical service to that area to help. That's a type of aid. They might also send military troops, especially if there's an area of the world where two groups are fighting and there's no real government to control the area. Unfortunately, some regions of the world are like that. There's a very weak or no government. So the people living there, they really have no protection from bad people in their community. So other countries will send military troops to help keep peace and act like policemen until that region can develop their own police force and military to keep the peace in their own community. So those are types of services. You can also send goods as aid, right? We talked about that before. Supplies, right? We usually say supplies. So what are supplies? Of course, food is a type of supply or good that you can send as aid. But medicine is very important because, especially after disaster or flooding, people might get sick. There might be disease in an area, so you want to make sure that people have enough medicine to prevent disease and keep everyone healthy. So these are all different types of aid: money, services, and goods. Okay. Let's do the reading. Now, as usual, I'll read it out loud. Please repeat after me. Focus on pronunciation, and also remember the vocabulary words that we went over at the beginning of this lesson. Are you guys ready? Here we go. We are all part of the world, and the world is made up of many different nations. These nations need each other to survive and get through difficult times. Therefore, nations should work together to help each other. During difficult times, like when there is a disaster, nations give aid and supplies to the nation having trouble. In 2011, when Japan had a terrible earthquake, many countries sent aid to help the Japanese people. The nations of the world should do some things to help each other well. For example, it is important for nations to keep in touch with each other. This can happen if the leaders of nations meet regularly and discuss problems in the world. Discussing problems means that the nation's leaders will learn to help the people in trouble from the meetings. Okay. Let's take a look at how this reading passage was organized. What kind of organizational model does it follow? Well, this follows the idea of main idea and details. Again, you have a main idea and then you support that main idea with many different details or examples. In this case, what is the main idea? The main idea is nations should work together to beep each other. What should nations do? Actually, what should people do? On an individual basis or on a family basis, community-wide basis, national basis. Nations should work together, of course, to help each other. We are all in the same boat. We are all in the same world. We should all work to help each other out. So, when there is a blank in a nation, other nations give blank and supplies to the nation. So what type of situation happens in which other nations give supplies to that nation? Remember we talked about a situation, remember 2011, they talked about an earthquake in Japan? An earthquake is a type of what? It is a type of disaster. Disaster. So, there are many kinds of disasters, earthquakes, fires, floods, unfortunately, and these things happen every year. So, when there is a disaster in a nation, other nations give what? They give supplies, and they also give, in the reading passage it says that they give beep and supplies, although you could argue that supplies is a type of aid, right? So, aid and supplies, but really, supplies is a type of aid, so that's okay. But they give help and supplies to the nation. Okay, aid. Next one, leaders of nations meet regularly and beep problems in the world. What do they do about problems? Of course, they can't really take action right away. First, they have to figure out or decide what action to take. Before you decide, you need to talk about or discuss the problems. Remember, discuss, not discuss about, just discuss. So be careful with that one. That's a common mistake. And discuss problems in the world. Now, if you use talk, of course, you're going to say talk about. Meet regularly and talk about problems in the world. But with discuss, just discuss problems in the world. Okay. Last one. The nation's leaders will the nation's leaders will learn to help the people in trouble from the beep. Okay, when they're meeting and they're discussing the problems, of course they're meeting. What do we call that? We call that a meeting. From the meetings. That was in the reading passage. From the meetings, okay? So meetings because they get together regularly, or they get together often, so they have many meetings because unfortunately there's many disasters. But of course, the nation's leaders don't just get together in times of disaster, they also get together regularly to talk about other types of problems or to talk about how they can help each other or work together to solve problems that might occur in the future. And this is basically, it sounds, they didn't mention it specifically, but obviously they're talking about the United Nations here, especially in this one, and we just call that the UN, right? The United Nations. Okay, so this lesson was about the fact that we live in different types of communities, right? We live in small communities, our home, but there's also larger types of communities: neighborhood, community, state, nation, world, right? So we all are connected, and we all should think about how can we help each other. You know, sometimes bad things happen. We can try to prevent them, but they'll happen. And how do we help other people who are having a bad time or who experienced a disaster? This passage was about what kind of aid or what kind of supplies, how can we help other people when they are in need? And it's very important to help other people, even if they're in a different community, even if they're in a different nation. Because when you think about it, we are all really in the same community, the same global community, or the worldwide community. So it's important to help each other out, because who knows, sometimes you might need their help. But of course, if we help each other out, usually or normally, then we can all live together much more productively. Okay, well, that was this lesson. Thank you for studying with me. Hope you learned a lot of good words and maybe some good ideas to think about and read more about. Anyway, thank you for studying with me. We'll see you in the next lesson. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.